But yeah, guys, this is gonna be a bitching episode where Alex complains about a hybrid application he had to work on. Imagine an iOS app and an Android app, native, everything's fine, like good old MVC and all that baggage, UI view controllers and all. But there is a JavaScript component, and not what you think, not React Native thingy, but a business logic shared for both apps in JavaScript, and then gets packaged as a bundle with iOS and in some kind of bundle with Android. I don't know how it works there.
Right.
And is shipped with the code in the App Store, right? So when you download the app, you get the native code and you get the JavaScript bundle.
Right.
And in certain cases, in certain scenarios, when the app runs, when it needs to do something, compute something, I believe even like do some networking or whatnot, it will call JavaScript for that. Both will, iOS and Android.
Right.
And that was the whole point for that project, so that quote-unquote feature parity, right? And the way to achieve it is through that shared code. And at the first glance, on the surface, you would think that's a great idea.
So let me step in here, actually. I was just about to say, actually, that sounds great. So you have your core business, because I've actually discussed this with you. I was I was thinking, you just have your core business logic. You have tons of code duplication between your Android and your iOS client. The core business logic is going to be the same. So I thought, just intuitively, this sounds like a good thing.
Yeah, and as far as I recall, you were saying, can't you do that like in C++?
Yeah, so actually, when we were having the discussion, I said, you can have your shared core business logic in C++, and both your iOS code and your Java code can call into that. This is a discussion we had before.
Right.
Yeah,
and it sounds sensible, and I actually do agree that's a great idea conceptually, and I would love to do that. The problem, the problem is the concrete, particular, specific implementation, right? And C++ or C, I guess C++ is bad enough already for myriads of reasons, in my opinion. But JavaScript is even worse. We had an episode about that a while ago. In my opinion, JavaScript is not suitable for any kind of development, honestly. But let's not go into that. But in this case, the decision was made not to share that logic using C++, but JavaScript, right? And at first, it was fine. Actually, as far as I know, historically for that team, it allowed them to move fast because every single developer on the team is a polyglot. They know JavaScript, they know Swift, they know Objective-C, they know Java, and they can just kind of run with it, right? And when necessary, let's say they work on iOS, when necessary, they quickly jump to JavaScript side of things, build stuff out there, and then hook it up to iOS and Android, and they're good to go. Where it all starts to break down is when you bring new people on board who are not as who are less of a polyglot developers,
right,
who are less experienced, because to be a polyglot, quite frankly, you need to be at a certain level in your development experience. Roughly speaking, don't expect a junior, obviously, be a polyglot, maybe if not even a mid-level developer, quite often. So yeah, and the new people will come in, and they might not be, maybe they're still polyglots, but not as experienced in, let's say, JavaScript, right? Or even Java, when they change stuff, let's say they know Swift and JavaScript, they come from the iOS side, they change Swift code, then JavaScript code, but then they need to hook it up back to Java, and that doesn't work. But most people, though, most developers will be specialists in a particular platform and or language. So you hire new iOS devs, most likely chances are, especially these days, they know Swift, and that's it. Not even Objective-C. And obviously no JavaScript. And other way around, you get a JavaScript person, they're
not going to know Swift.
Yeah, they're like awesome with their React, Angular, whatever they have there, but they have no idea how to do things on iOS or Android.
Right.
And how to hook it up and so on. So that's one long-term problem, right? Already.
Okay, so that's one problem is the inexperience. Being a polyglot requires a certain level of experience, and expecting programmers on that code base to have that is setting you up for potential failure down the road.
Yeah.
Okay.
And another long-term issue is, well, I guess kind of similar. Either you grow your team and you hire new people, or you just simply replace because people leave, right? You need developers
Natural
to replace
turnover,
them.
yeah.
Exactly. New people, even, again, let's say they're polyglots and let's say they're experienced, they still experience way more friction debugging things specifically and building new things with such a complex setup of multi-language, multi-context setup. Because things are in JavaScript world, even when you're running them client-side from iOS or Android, they're way different from Swift context. Swift things and Java things.
Okay.
And simply debugging top to bottom the whole system, let's say you have a caching issue, and the caching ultimately happens somewhere in the JavaScript side of things.
Right.
But you need to come from, roughly speaking, view controller point of view, right? As you usually start to debug, right? In the UI, you see the caching, like something displayed wrong, right? Some piece of data that wasn't.
And then you start at the view
cache.
controller level, because that's kind of where it's immediately the bug is making itself apparent.
Then you look at where the data come from. Oh, it came from.
You look at the call stack to
this
see
thing,
where it came
this
from.
thing, exactly.
Right.
And then eventually get to JavaScript side of things. And that's where you get into trouble, or rather, trouble/friction, right? You need to have your Safari set up in a certain way to connect it and attach it to your running process.
Safari?
In simulator. Yeah, Safari web browser. So that you debug using the debugger tool there.
Oh, is that what it is? Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And then you have multiple, at least in their setup, they had multiple JavaScript contexts within the app, for reasons I unfortunately am not very versed in that. Like why it was done that way and what's the benefit or disadvantage. And then you kind of go through the land of JavaScript, which again, in this specific case was actually not even just simply JavaScript. It was a mix of JavaScript, plain old ECMA 5 or whatever it's called, then ECMA 6, and then CoffeeScript. It was like a mix of those three.
Mm-hmm.
Which technically gives you almost 2-3 languages there, diversity. Which again, yet another overhead, right? You need to at least be somehow familiar with all of them. So that's already bad enough, right? You deep in the woods of another wood, right? That you didn't even think you will go to, because you originally started to debug from Swift side. And on top of it, the tools just you guys, you would think as iOS developers we always complain about Xcode and how bad it is and how often it breaks and crashes. When you hook things up with Safari that way, it's even worse. So specifically, in what I experienced as I debug things in JavaScript world, Safari would just freeze, just simply become unresponsive for no reason, and was quite difficult to work around and figure out.
Okay, so the one is the people problem and the training and the knowledge. That's one problem, and the second one is I think is basically the tools and the
context switching and the tools.
Okay, so I have a question. So one is, I feel like the people problem, that's a separate discussion, but I think the solving that is just a matter of hiring the right people, or maybe having a separation of responsibility for your developers,
or training them.
Training them. That is, I feel like, not a issue that is necessarily unsolvable. Now, the issue with the different tools, was that what it is?
The different contexts that you go through as you develop with multi-language, multi-context.
I guess what I'm trying to find out, is this a problem that's inherent to JavaScript? Let's say you had a shared C++ library. Would you have these same complaints?
In a way, possibly, but I would think way less, because of the similarity between languages. Your context switch is not as severe, if you will. If that makes sense, because C++ is still objective-oriented thing, as well, Swift, for example, right? So your frame of mind, if you will, is the same.
You're coming in, you don't have to do a huge context switch. So my question is, don't people already do these context switches in existing applications because React Native is a thing, right? So I think in Airbnb, there's something like their sign-up flow or something like that is done in React Native. Now, they seem, as far as I can tell, to be happy with that, right? So what is different about them? Why are they able to live with that?
As far as I know, right, and, well, unfortunately, I don't really know how it goes internally when they develop, right? But my understanding with what React Native developers told me, they try to do context switching as less as possible. So they prefer to stay in their JavaScript world 100%. Probably ends up being like 90% of the time, maybe 95%. But still, though, the context switching is painful because most of those React developers do not really know iOS, so they don't know what to do there, or Android. And you need people specifically knowing those technologies, right? But React Native is a completely different story, I would think. Comparing to what I was talking about.
But I'm trying to say the context switch of switching between JavaScript and Swift, for example, because that's what you were saying earlier, right? That's the problem. But I guess my argument is people doing React Native seem to be fine, other than, I guess you just mentioned, they try to minimize the context switching. Okay, I guess my intuition is that it's a good thing, this shared library.
Right. Yeah.
It just makes sense. It just makes sense. You're not having code duplication and you have this shared code base, and it just...
Yeah, fair enough. The practicality of it, though, essentially it wasn't like a statistically significant or statistically viable survey or anything like that I've done. But what I did, I simply talked to everyone I can on the team, iOS team, and all of the developer, every single one of them were not happy with that.
So let me ask, were these native iOS developers, or were they JavaScript developers doing iOS?
Native iOS. And the main complaint was the friction of debugging.
Okay.
And another reason besides what I described, right, where switching context and all, there was no clear-cut vertical line of architecture throughout the two contexts. That was, I would think, even actually the bigger problem.
But isn't that a problem with how it was implemented? That's an architecture thing, which
Probably.
is up to the implementers.
Right.
So I guess because I'm being the counterweight here, because I feel like this is a good thing, and you were just saying earlier, intuitively it sounds good. So to me, I still intuitively think it's good. So I'm trying to find out, is it the language itself? Like, is that the variable? Like, let's say we could write everything in Kotlin, which is the thing now.
Yeah.
Would that solve it? Or let's say it's a people problem. Is it that just the fact that these native iOS developers aren't properly trained in JavaScript, and really what they're complaining about is something that could be fixed with the 4 to 6 week training where they learn JavaScript fully, right? So what I'm trying to do is figure out, is it something inherently wrong with this approach, or is it some piece that we can play with? Like, is it the training of people, or is it the language, or is it the debugging tools, right? Because I honestly feel like 5-10 years from now, are we not going to solve this problem? Like, I feel like, especially with React Native coming onto the scene, I feel like we're moving towards trying to have crossover as much from the different client, Android and iOS mostly, implementation. So I feel like it's going to happen. I don't know to what degree, but it's going to keep happening, and because it makes sense. From a just coding and business standpoint, you're getting more work, or you're having to do less work, basically, which means you can get more done. So yeah.
My answer to this is, I believe that this is an implementation problem, and specifically tool problem, and in this case, the tool being the language. I agree. Code sharing sounds awesome and a great idea. Pick the right tool for that, though. And as you mentioned, Kotlin, in my opinion, would be way better solution, because there is, I want to say, almost no context switching, or it's very minimal, because the difference between languages
between Kotlin and Swift is very minimal.
Specifically, yep. Yes. And also there is another advantage, which I forgot to mention, the problem with working with JavaScript and with that setup. Data needs to be mapped back and forth between two contexts, JavaScript and Swift, and vice versa.
Right.
So you have your chunks of JSON objects, but they need to be mapped into native types. On Swift side, that's an overhead. You might not have data for some reason, or you change some data type on the JS side, but you forget to change it on Swift side, but then things break because you unwrap forcefully or whatnot. Yeah. Well, and vice versa, right? This is just the boilerplate overhead that doesn't help anyone. If you use Kotlin, they have a native compiler to LLVM executables, so your Kotlin code can be natively with native types called from Swift and vice versa. That makes it streamlined. It's a straight path from one environment to another without any overhead, really. Makes it also way faster. At some point, for some apps, it's going to be a concern as well. Makes it smaller, I believe, too, because since it's an executable, that's not a JavaScript bundle that needs to be then evaluated and evaluated at runtime, right?
Okay. I think we should probably wrap up here soon, because we're reaching almost the 20-minute mark.
Right.
I'll let you finish, but I just want to say, I guess what I was trying to figure out today was, because you mentioned before we started the podcast, I want to talk about how we had this shared code and how it wasn't working. And immediately I thought, it's probably because it's JavaScript, because I know you're not a fan of JavaScript. So I'm trying to figure out, is it just the language, and is it just the tools, or is there something inherently wrong with is it too optimistic to say, we can share a lot of code between Android and iOS? And so I guess you can maybe finish off answering that.
Yes. And also I'll probably...
Wait, yes, what?
Sorry. I can finish up with that, and probably go a little bit overboard, because I want to add something about React Native too with my answer.
Okay.
So to the short answer, no, I don't think there is anything inherently wrong with sharing code between two platforms, but only the business logic code. What is inherently wrong is to share UI code, which is platform specific.
Which is what React Native does?
Precisely.
Okay.
Because that is the third party outside thing, outside of your architectural boundary, right? Conceptually. You should not, your application, no matter in what language you build it, it should not ideally know where it is run, right? Where is it launched? Is it launched in a browser, an iOS platform, Android platform, or in a terminal? It should not care. And that's the whole problem there. If you have your shared code built that way, great. That's the ideal goal. But if you're
build where the business logic is shared, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
But if your shared code is some UI thing,
which is React Native essentially,
that just breaks that.
Okay, and so how does this relate though to the original problem? Because it sounded like they were sharing the business logic, not the UI logic.
Right.
So what went wrong there specifically?
So conceptually, it was good. It was a good choice. I cannot argue. I actually support it. The problem there was the implementation.
Okay.
The chosen tool.
Okay.
I believe Kotlin at the time when they were doing that, which was several years ago, Kotlin wasn't around for that. I believe if they chose simply C++ or something like that for that, it would have been way better. Okay. That's really it.
Okay, so use the right tool for the job. It's not inherently wrong, but if you use the wrong tool, it's going to be painful. That's maybe it. Okay, cool. Thanks very much, Alex. That was interesting. Thanks, guys, for listening. You can find us on Twitter at InsideIOSDev, and you can check out Alex's book. You want to tell him, Alex?
It's the iOS interview guide. It will help you, prep for iOS interviews.
Oh, man. I've heard about it. I've heard it's amazing.
It is good. It is good. Go check it out. It's the website is iosinterviewguide.com. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Take care, guys. Thanks for listening.
Bye.